Hey guys, how's it going? So on March 12th of 2022, I did a video on this channel and it was titled Gun Control Just Passed, and most people don't even know it. Maybe some of you guys saw that video. But there was indeed gun control passed, hidden within a Consolidated Appropriations Act. It passed on the 12th, but it was signed into law on March 15th. And this is the so-called NICS Denial Notification Act. Now you hear NICS check denial. So when you go buy a gun, you have to fill out a 4473 form, which is required if you're buying from a licensed dealer, an FFL, whether it's at a gun show or a shop or otherwise location of the licensee, right? So you fill out that form, and in some states there's what's called a NICS check. That's the National Instant Check System. There's a bypass or an exemption in some states if you have like a CPL, CHL, whatever, your carry permit, right? But in many states throughout the country, that is not an exemption. And even though you've already had your fingerprints and gone through all the extra background checks, training, all of that, your gun dealer still has to call in a NICS check. Okay, to get that out of the way. Now we hear denial. That's kind of obvious. That's when you get your background check done and they go through and they compare it against all these comprehensive databases. NICS does, and they say denied, meaning you're not, air quotes, allowed to buy a gun. You could be a prohibited person, otherwise, and they're just going to deny the sale, and the FFL cannot legally sell it to you. Now hold on, before all of you leave this video, because a bunch of you are saying, well, I've never been denied before. Here's the problem with laws like this, and here's the problem when we get into agency interpretation, right? Where they're trying to make laws outside of the law. See, this law just had to do with NICS check denials. I don't agree with any part of this law. Go back and watch my previous video. All of this is very frustrating, and I would also note very unconstitutional. Okay? These are natural rights endowed by your creator, and the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. But even within this constitutionally infringing law, this was to do with them reporting your address, okay, which you put on the 4473, but that's not normally given to NICS, okay? This has to do with reporting that address to NICS so they can give it to local law enforcement if there's a denial. Again, unconstitutional, unacceptable. Now they've just moved the goalpost and turned it into delays, which a delay is completely different than a denial. Now, I would note, of the denials, the GOA has put out information, published information that says around 90% or more of the denials are actual false denials, which I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that. This is the federal government. They are the problem with all this. They make mistakes like crazy, and so that's of the denials. Now, a delay, it's a little bit different. A delay could just literally include, okay, we need to research this a little further. We can't give an instant answer, whether your FFL is calling on the phone or using the e-check system where they enter it into a computer. We might need an additional, it could be minutes, it could be hours, it could be a couple days. This can vary, right? Well, now they're rechanging this, and I'm going to read from this memo that was sent out to FFLs, and a friend of mine that's in the industry sent me an email from the NSSF, which is the big leading organization for the gun industry, right? And they add a little bit of information to this as well. So I'm going to source the NSSF and this memo that was just sent out to, I'm going to say presumably most gun shops. It was supposedly sent out to all gun shops, but I do know an FFL holder that has a gun shop that had not received this letter yet. Maybe he'll receive it later, but let's just say most, and eventually, if not all, gun shops are going to get this. So here's the meat and potatoes. Delay. It can mean many things. It doesn't mean you're prohibited. It doesn't really mean anything at all until they make a final decision, which would be to proceed with the transaction. That's called a status update. Or it could turn into a denial. Then we're back to what I said earlier. They cannot transfer you the firearm. This is to do with dealers. And I know in a lot of states, you guys have so-called universal background checks where you have to go through an FFL, even if you're trying to transfer a firearm to a friend, a relative, or otherwise. So this is going to apply to a lot of people. For example, in Michigan, having a CPL is no longer a NICS check alternative. GOA is working on that in the courts right now. It violates the Brady Bill. It should be an exemption in Michigan, but I'm just giving you guys an example. They took that away. That's a whole nother story. I've covered that in the past on this channel too. Okay. Delay. A lot of you guys have been delayed before. Again, doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Look, the Second Amendment doesn't even say shall not be infringed unless you did something wrong, but I digress. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. People get delays all the time for so many reasons. It could be minutes, it could be seconds. I'm going to add one more note because I've done some research over the last 24 hours with a couple FFL holders that I know, and I have some background information to add to this. So there's a couple different ways they can do this background check, either online, digitally, or they can call the actual phone center for NICS and verbally give the operator on the phone the information. They'll run it through their systems. And it used to be that if they just needed a couple minutes to look at a couple quick things, maybe there's somebody in your area with the same name as yours who's a prohibited person. Maybe there's something they see that they need to get further clarification on in your file. Yeah, they keep a file on all of us, obviously. I think you guys know that. And they used to say when they called it in, this is for the phone call ones, which I actually like the dealers that do that, because when they do it digitally, it's just sending all the info to NICS period, and it just puts it all there. And we've already know, it's been proven now, that they're keeping a database on all of these purchases. So I like it when it's on a piece of paper. Yes, the ATF can come in and take pictures of all of them, as we've seen recently. At least it makes it a little more work for them, and you're not just willingly sending them all the info. That's my personal opinion. Not telling people how to run their businesses, but I like local gun shops who call them in. I think it adds an extra level of privacy for the purchaser, for most of you, right? Now, with that said, it used to be a thing where they'd say further research, and the FFL holder would just sit on the phone for maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, and they would generally come back in most cases and say, okay, proceed. It would proceed. It never went into what's called a delayed status. Well, around the time COVID hit, they were short-staffed, record numbers of gun purchases, and they got rid of the further research and just made all the phone calls a delay. If it required further research, it would be a delay. Now, they would still do instant proceeds as well, but a delay became more all-encompassing because the further research was eliminated from the phone calls. Till further notice, I don't know if they're ever going to bring it back. So just make note of that, because that's going to come into play here. It could literally be a 30-second, formerly a 30-second further review, they would call it, and then say, okay, proceed. That's gone now for the phone calls, for the phone call background checks. It just goes into a delay. And people that are delayed, you're now going to have your information sent to local law enforcement, obviously also to the feds, because your FFL would give it to the feds, and then they would relay it on to local law enforcement, if and only if you want to be able to proceed with that transaction. Alright, I'm going to go over this real quick here. Sorry this video is a little bit long, but I want to go into this more thoroughly because I've seen reports on this, but I don't know if anyone's dove into this super deep. And by the way, when you guys are done watching this video, check out all my other videos here on YouTube. I appreciate all of you guys that support here, but also check out my Locals community. I'm going to leave a link for it in the pinned comment. Locals is a censorship-free site where I post content there daily. I usually do like 1 or 2 standalone videos a week there. That's bonus stuff that might not necessarily conform to the terms of YouTube, but on Locals, it's totally fine. So you guys could get extra videos there. I also do at least 1, if not 2 live streams where I can touch guns on Locals once a week. And I also post daily deals that a lot of you guys really like. So this is stuff I'm doing over on Locals and not YouTube. So definitely check that out as well. It's free to join, or it's a way that you can support for even more perks. Alright, this came from NSSF, and it's going to have basically the letter that was sent to the FFLs with a little bit of extra information coming from NSSF. And this shows you how we have a law that's a gun control law that's built into an Appropriations Act, and how NICS is further changing and adding more onto what the law than what the law actually says. So synopsis, on or around 9/26/2022, FFLs will be prompted to provide the address of the buyer on all denied or delayed transactions. Read below for more details. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, that was that sneaky gun control that I did the video about back on March 12th. Section 1101 of the Act included the NICS Denial Notification Act of 2022. Okay, denial. I don't agree with any of this. Not delay, but we're going to see where they're encompassing delay into this. The Act requires the Attorney General to report background check denials to state authorities, and will require the FBI Criminal Justice Information Services Divisions, National Instant Criminal Background Check System, which is NICS, send NICS section to report all FBI NICS denied transactions to local law enforcement within 24 hours beginning October 1st, 2022. This is right around the corner. The NICS section plans to implement this change on September 26th, 2022. The denial notification will include the date and time of the denial, the reason for the denial, the location of the Federal Firearms Licensee, FFL, and the identity of the person. The NICS denial notifications will be transmitted electronically to the appropriate receiving authorities within each state based on the city, state, county, and zip code combination of the FFL location, and the city, state, county, and if different, the zip code combination of the attempted transferee's home address. If at any time the original denial is changed to a proceed, an updated notification to those agencies originally notified will be required. They already have your info at that point, keep in mind. Just remember, when they do the NICS check, they're not giving them your address. They're giving you other information, but not that. The NICS section is working diligently on developing the tools to make this notification as seamless as possible. Great. To make the necessary notifications, all FFLs will be required to provide the buyer's complete address as recorded on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Form 4473 for FFLs who initiate a check by contacting the NICS contracted call center. That's the calls. They're no longer doing further research. It goes straight to a delay, even if they just needed to clarify something about you in 30 seconds. That's what I was talking about earlier. The address will be required if the customer receives a delay or denied status. This was called the NICS Denial Notification Act. Now it's also delay. The net just got way bigger. It got way more sweeping, and a lot of people get delayed on a regular basis for no reason at all. They're perfectly, quote, law-abiding, right? You don't have to be law-abiding according to the Second Amendment. I'm just telling you guys. That's a broad sweeping net they're casting here. The information will be required before the status is provided by the NCC. Here's what this means. If it goes into a delay, they have to do this further research. The status, the provided status would be, in this case, NICS calling them back to say, okay, the status is now proceed, which it's going to be in almost all cases. That's the status update. They will not give you that status update. Or denied would also be another status update, right? So it could go from delayed to either proceed or denied. It's saying right here they won't give you the status update, meaning if you don't give them that address, if the FFL doesn't give the feds your address, which they're saying they're going to give to local law enforcement, all the way down to where your specific jurisdiction is within your home address, they're not going to give you an update. So if it was a delay and you refuse to give your address, or the FFL refuses to give it to them, it's just going to sit there and stay in a perpetual delay. And you're not going to be able to get your gun from that FFL. That's what that means. Okay? I'll read it again. The information will be required before the status is provided by the NCCC. That's the call center. For FFLs that initiate the check through the NICS e-check, that's the online where they put it into the computer. Some of them have you fill out the 4473 yourself at the keyboard. In other cases, they just have the paper and then they type it in. You guys have probably experienced one or the other or both. The address will be required if the customer receives a delay or denied response. I would notice there still is a further research option for the e-check, but no longer on the phone. Again, this all developed over COVID. And I don't know if they'll ever change it back again. So if it's just further research, that's not technically a delay. That could still play out, but if it goes into a delay, that's when they have to provide your address to the feds and then to be passed on to local law enforcement. The response will not be retrievable until the information is provided. So there you go. If it's a delay, they won't give you a response. And if they don't get a response, meaning proceed, you can take it. Denied, well, then you can't take the gun home. You're not going to be able to take the gun home until they provide it for the e-check or for the call center. Once the system is updated to allow for the capturing of this information, an additional notification will be provided. In addition, if the transfer occurs at a qualifying gun show, future programming may allow for the full address of the gun show location to be entered. This is a huge data collection thing, yet again, as they're collecting more and more and more data. Why do they want all this data? For those of you still listening, let me know down in the comments. With all the other information we found out they're doing, going to people's houses lately, asking them why they bought multiple guns at a time. ATF agents seen in plain view, taking pictures of all of the records to put into, back on their phone, presumably to put into the database that they've been busted creating, even though there's a federal law that says they can't make a registry. Just think about how all of this mixes with what's going on here right now. Here's a footnote. NSSF has confirmed with NICS that FFLs will not be required to provide the buyer's complete address as recorded on Form 4473 when initiating a background check. So if you just get a proceed instantly, you're not going to have to provide this. It'll just be a proceed. NICS will require FFLs to provide NICS with this information in the event of a denial or a delay. NICS advises that the reason for asking for the buyer's complete address information in the case of delay is because, listen to this, in the event the delay is determined to be a denial, the NICS Denial Notification Act requires NICS to notify law enforcement information within 24 hours of denial, including the prohibited person's address. NICS believes they would not be able to meet this statutory 24-hour requirement if they had to contact the FFL in order to obtain the buyer's address. So, a law that said people who were denied, which this is a starkly different category, applies to way less people than delays. I think you guys all get that, right? The law said denial. Now they're sweeping delays in that, and their whole reason is, this is how they're, quote, justifying this. Give me a break. They're saying within 24 hours they don't have time to call the FFL, get the person's address that became a denial, and then enter it into a computer. That does not sound reasonable to me at all. No gun control laws are reasonable to me at all, but even within the framework of this law that deals with denials, they're sweeping delays in there because they wouldn't be able to call the gun shop and get the person's address and put it into a database. Now, I know there's going to be different opinions from viewers on this. A lot of you read the Second Amendment literally as it's written. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And many of you would say, all gun control is unconstitutional. And many of you would say, but it doesn't say unless you're a prohibited person in the Second Amendment. And you're right, it actually doesn't say that. Now I'm going to have another group of viewers that say, hold on a minute. If it's a felon, if it's a whatever, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. I know there's people listening right now that think that. Okay, well, if you do think that, this was supposed to be for denials. Now they've swept delays in there, okay? A delay is completely different than a denial, but they're putting those people in this same category where they will now ask for, if you want the delay to turn into a proceed anyways, and get your gun, you're going to have to, your FFL is going to have to provide this address to not only the feds, but then they will forward it all the way down to your most local levels of law enforcement, is what I'm reading here. And now law enforcement has all your information. To do what with? You can totally imagine that. So the whole thing that some people say where we need to enforce the laws we already have, we need to bust all these people that are prohibited that are trying to buy guns. Okay, if you're in that camp, okay, do you think that should also include delayed people where you know that most of the time, almost all the time, the delay is just literally they need a couple more minutes to clarify. This isn't John Smith that was previously a convicted murderer. This is the other John Smith in town that has no record at all. So no matter what side of the fence you're on, if you're on the first camp, obviously you hate everything to do with this. But even if you're in the latter, if you're of the only law-abiding citizens should be able to keep and bear arms. Look, guys, I'm just saying there's a lot of people that think that way. You certainly, I would hope, think that this is BS because it's now lumping delays in there, which in most cases has nothing to do with the person actually being denied or prohibited. And I would note, according to the GOA, 90% of these classifications are actually false and erroneous by the agencies that are reporting this information or in the NICS system in and of itself. So hopefully that summed it up. I know it was a little bit longer video, but some of you guys tell me sometimes you like these little bit longer videos, and I think I was pretty thorough on this. But there's bound to be some questions, so leave those down in the comments. I'll try to help as much as I can. I came out with this story a day after it broke because I wanted to get some more background info. Hopefully that helps some of you guys digest this. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. And let me know down in the comments what you guys think. And I hope to see more of you guys over on Locals. There's no ads for you to watch. Totally censorship free. There's no algorithm. It's just me being able to be myself. And the supporters have a perk where they can actually add content and contribute to the community as well. Alright guys, thanks for watching. And have a good one.